Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Diz Collections. I am coming to you from my parents' loft in their attic today and digging up my old Atari 2600 collection. This is going to be a bit of a weird collections thing because I haven't actually touched a lot of these games in best part of 20 years, I'd say. So to be able to talk about them is all going to be based on memories as opposed to remembering exactly how they were. So I'm going to include footage of the game so you can actually see what I'm talking about and seeing if my memories are actually any good. So I'm just basically going to go through what's in this box. I don't think my entire collection of when I was a kid is still here. I think some games got lost in transit over the years, but let's first look at, for some reason I have two consoles. So it's the Atari 2600 Junior Edition, known to a lot of people. I got this maybe in about 1990. So obviously the console itself was well out of date by then, but I was a 6-year-old kid. I'd originally played NES, and to be honest, getting an Atari at the age of 6, I really couldn't tell too much difference about the graphics back then. I was just happy to have my own first console. One of the games I don't think is still here, and is a game that I got with it, is the Mario Brothers port for the Atari 2600. At the time I played Super Mario Brothers, and I think possibly Super Mario Brothers 3, maybe not at that time. So to get any sort of Mario game, I was just happy that I had a computer to play Mario on, and I loved that game so much, and I'm a bit disappointed that I don't have it anymore. And obviously there's a lot less to the Mario Brothers game, especially on the 2600, than sort of the NES Super Mario Brothers games, but nonetheless I loved it to bits. So yes, we've got two versions, I think because my sister's boyfriend from years back used to have one as well, and we kind of just merged everything at some point. A lot of wires in here, but most importantly, a controller. When I was younger, I really struggled with how stiff these were, and they still are quite stiff. You know, they don't seem to have much movement in them, but they do the job, and all the games perfectly fine. I actually used a different controller called a Cruiser, which was compatible with a lot of different sort of home computers of the time, and I think even the Mega Drive, because they have the same sort of port. It was a little bit more clicky and just manoeuvred a little bit better for my little hands at the time. So I've got a couple of plugs there, an aerial lead, but I don't think that's really going to work on a lot of TVs nowadays. I'd have to get some sort of connection for that. So where do we start then? Pole position. Obviously, big arcade hit for Namco, I believe. A lot of the old arcade games were ported to the 2600 with variable degrees of success. Graphically, it's not actually that bad for a 2600 game. I remember playing it, not particularly being very good. I'd probably only get to 3 or 4 points in or something before my timer ran out. I don't know if I was as good with the gear shifting or even if it was available on that version, but I remember graphically thinking this is reasonably good for the 2600. It had some good sort of scaling effects almost, so yeah, that's cool. I've got another copy of Pole Position there. Battlezone, again, sort of game, it says the explosive arcade hit on it. I never really thought I knew what I was doing on this game too much. I'd be moving left and right and forward and back, and you'd see things off in the distance and you'd sort of shoot them and you'd get points, but I never really progressed far enough to really know what I was doing in it. I think it'd be a game I'd always come back to and then try and figure out what the hell I was doing, but never really got too far. But the fact I remember it at all must mean it left some sort of thing on me. What's we got? Decathlon by Activision. Now, this is their attempt at track and field, I'm guessing, really, because it was probably released around a similar time. I'm just looking at the dates, 1983. So yeah, it's probably around the same time track and field came out. I think that might have been in 82 or 84. So yeah, button mashing and whatnot. But the fact is, the decathlon is obviously a lot of events. I quite remember this being quite fond of this. I think a couple of the events were quite difficult, and I probably wasn't very good at them. But the button mashing I was always quite good at as a kid. So I used to like them sort of sports games where it basically was button mashing all the time. Rampage. I think I remember, if you've watched my Wii Collections video, you'll know that I picked up a more recent version of Rampage for the Wii. And I mentioned about Rampage on the Atari 2600 being my first experience of the game. Really did love this game. Played and played and played and got through so many cities. I'm not sure how many levels there actually are on this version, but I remember getting into the dozens and it was still going. A lot of fun. I think it was 2-player on the Atari as well, so you could pick a character each and smash up the buildings and that. Graphically very simple for Atari, but it did the job. Each character was a different colour and the buildings all looked the same with just a different shade in whatever city you're in. But very good arcade game and quite a decent port, I thought. River Raid, again by Activision. They seem to be the kings of these games, but River Raid, one of my all-time favourites on the 2600. Would spend a long time trying to get further and further into it. I just remember one time playing it for 20-30 minutes straight probably, and it just kept going and going and getting harder and harder, faster, more stuff going on. Basically a vertical shooter really, but you're limited to where you can fly over the river, keep your fuel level high, shoot down everything in your path pretty much. But brilliant game, great for the Atari 2600. I know they did a sequel, River Raid 2, which I never played. I might have to check it out on my on the emulators to see what that's like. But yeah, definitely one of my favourites and one I'll definitely come back to. Warlords, I think this is one of the games my sister's ex had, and I never really remember playing this, so I won't really talk about that one, it's just there. Real Sports Boxing. I remember it having different characters, and for the Atari 2600 it looked quite good, close to NES in places, but the gameplay I don't think was brilliant. I don't really recall it being that memorable a game of boxing, so it got picked up at some point, but it's never stood the test of time on me. 32 games in one, well that says it all. And you think a lot of these carts would be sort of throwaway titles. However, this is actually 32 full Atari 2600 games as far as I'm aware. There's games like Combat on here. I'll be rubbish with the titles because they came on a nice little piece of paper that used to tell me what they were all called, which I don't think I have anymore. But there's some really good titles on there, and because I got this console so late in its life, this can package with it, and it's kind of an all you want sort of thing. And it made sense come 1990. They weren't releasing really any new games for the console, so just chuck all the old ones on here, keep the punters happy, and you get a console at a budget price. So yeah, I mean they're not particularly pricey online or anything, but they're good to have in a collection because it boosts your sort of game straight away. The Atari port of Donkey Kong. I actually think I remember playing Donkey Kong Classics on the NES, so the original Donkey Kong, prior to playing this, and I did notice, even at this age, notice a graphical difference and gameplay difference. I think there's only sort of 2 screens on this version. Obviously they get progressively harder. But it's okay. But I think because I'd played a superior version, I was just kind of a bit like, when it did come out. I think, with the Atari games, if you played a port on another console that's obviously superior, which a lot of consoles were, especially by the time I was playing it, that's when you really look at a game going, okay, fair enough. Their original games and games that were mainly only on that system, they're the better ones in my opinion. Saying that though, this next game was definitely on a lot of systems. However, the Atari 2600 one was actually quite a big accomplishment. That's California Games. You can see, for some reason, I used to write on my cartridges, so, as you do. I think there's only 4 events possibly on here: surfing, BMX, skateboarding, and footbag. Trying to think if there's any more, but I think it's just the 4. The surfing I could never really figure out what I was doing. It's very different to the other ports with the side sort of scrolling version. This is all on one screen, but I could never really quite figure it out. Footbag, quite similar to the other versions. Again, the skateboarding actually is on the vert ramp, which is quite similar and do similar tricks. The BMX was really quite original because it was side-scrolling, but it cut from scene to scene every time you'd enter a new one. So a lot of it was about memorisation of what bits come in next, so you could perform your stunts and pick up biggest pace possible. And I got really quite good at the BMX one, so that you'd blitz it without crashing and pick up, you know, get so much speed, you're taking these jumps and just doing some crazy stunts. So it's definitely an original version of California Games. Most other versions I've played all follow the similar formula. They obviously used the limitations of the 2600 to their advantage in making this one different, and it's very memorable, and it's one of my favourite games ever, California Games, on the NES and on here, so it's nice to own on there. Demon Attack. I remember my folks picking me this up out of the blue. We used to have a market stall in my hometown that, like I say, by the time I was playing the 2600 games, you could pick up cartridges for £2 each, and they just went on a whim and picked up Demon Attack. Space shooter, just going around at the bottom shooting demons, I guess. Above, quite addictive, quite basic, but, you know, fun game. Midnight Magic is a pinball simulator. Again, quite simple. One screen, a few different coloured sort of pinball machines and stuff. I don't think there's much changing from time to time. It's all about getting high scores, just like real pinball. Quite enjoyed this. Used to try and set my own scores. I remember having a birthday party one year and getting all my friends to play and having a competition who could get the highest score on it. And it's a decent pinball simulator for the Atari 2600. There's probably more pinball games on the 2600. I think there might have been one on the 32 games in one cartridge. But yeah, this is quite memorable for me. Joust, popular arcade game. Atari 2600 port. I'm really going to be able to say that properly at the end of this video. It's decent. It's okay. It's quite a simplistic looking game even in the arcades, so this port's not terrible. Another quite a big feat for the 2600 was Double Dragon released on it. Very, very hard game. With a lot of practice I got quite far, probably up to mission 4 I believe. I think there was only sort of 5 on this version, don't quote me on that. But it is very hard. Music playing throughout the whole game, just repeated main Double Dragon theme from mission 1, which, to be honest, having any game on the 2600 with constant music is quite a big accomplishment and not really heard in a lot of games. You're limited to sort of a single plane of walking along, and I think it was only sort of 4 characters on a screen at once. Graphics obviously nowhere near as good as the arcade or the NES or Master System versions, but for the 2600, absolutely stunning. I'm not going to lie. Backgrounds are great. Characters quite simplistic, but did the job, and it even had a 2-player mode on it, which is more than the NES had. So there you go. Junior Pac-Man. I probably should have talked about regular Pac-Man first, so I'm going to grab that at the same time if I can find it. Yes. I mean, a lot of people have heard about Pac-Man ports for the 2600 not being that great. It's quite simplistic and bland looking. I think they could have done better with the hardware to make it more faithful to the arcade original. But, you know, everyone knows about the video game crash and certain ports not being nearly good enough to warrant getting a console and whatnot and oversaturating the market. This, I think, is one of the reasons why people, you know, this sort of thing happened. At the time, I thought it was okay. As you get older and you see all the regular versions of Pac-Man around, you realise it wasn't that great. But then step in Junior Pac-Man, which I think was the 3rd in the arcade series. I think there's Ms. Pac-Man on the Atari as well. This plays and looks a little bit more like the arcade versions. So they probably took a bit more time with this and tried to amend their mistakes from before. So it's the better of the 2 games, but I've got nothing against the first one. It's what I got brought up with. Oink, which is a weird one, and a weird Activision game actually shows you a picture of the gameplay on there, which is quite rare for Atari, I think. If I remember right, it's kind of like a Three Little Pigs story. You've got a wolf trying to blow your house down, and you've got to keep fixing it with bricks before he does so. I think that's basically it. So kind of an arcade game, just rack up a high score and don't let the wolf into your house. Obelix, which is obviously from Asterix and Obelix, the French comic book series. I remember reading the comics, excuse me, a lot at school. So when I saw that there was an Obelix game, I didn't actually know there was an Asterix game on the Atari, which I believe there is, although he does appear in this. I can't remember the gameplay off the top of my head. I think it's to do with dropping rocks on bad guys. And something to do with Roman numerals and getting scores that way. I can't remember off the top of my head. I mean, when I do the capturing of the footage for this video, it's going to throw me back and be like, oh yeah, I get it now, and then I'll feel silly about it. But I remember it being a decent game, and I thought it was cool just to have an Asterix Obelix sort of game on the Atari, so I was happy to pick this up. 1986 apparently this one, so one of the newer 2600 games really. Crystal Castles, another game that I got with my Atari, the others being 32 games in one and Mario Brothers. I had a lot of fun playing this. Again, it's a game I grew up with, but I've since seen arcade versions that obviously look a lot better. But, you know, very playable for me to run around. It's a platformer at the end of the day, and that was quite rare for the 2600. So I was happy to play this, collect the tokens, kind of like a 3D Pac-Man almost. Collect all the things and avoid the bad guys, using lifts to go up to different levels and whatnot. Yeah, very fun, and interesting that a lot of Atari games you could pick the level you wanted to start on up to a certain number, which I always thought was kind of like a cheat code, I guess. But yeah, I quite enjoyed that one. Championship Soccer. Sports sims on the Atari, well, you know, they're never going to be brilliant, and this is one that isn't brilliant. It's not much variation. Basically, it's 3-on-3 soccer, or 4-on-4. You got goalkeepers as well. But your three outfield players move around in a triangle together, all together. So you can't separate them or control one at a time. And there's not really a sort of kick button, if I remember. You just kind of like dribble the ball along, and you're always playing it in front of you, and you just sort of have to try and get it to the goal without the other player getting to you. So like real football. But yeah, it's basic, and I think it was just kind of like red versus blue. There's no tournament mode. You just sort of play a game, but you select your difficulty prior. So yeah, it is what it is, but it's very graphically bland as hell. Not a lot to it at all. So we move on to Super Football, which is American football, and definitely graphically a hell of a lot better than the last game. This says 1988 on it, so it's got best part of 10 years over the 1980 Championship Soccer game. And it's more of a sort of Madden perspective. But because as a kid, I mean, I still don't know greatly now, but as a kid, having no clue about American football rules or anything, I didn't really know what I was doing. It was just get the ball, get it forward as quickly as I can and score a touchdown. But yeah, I was limited really because I didn't really know what I was doing. So, you know, it was one for the collection, but didn't get a lot of my time. Stargate. I'll be honest, I can't really remember too much about this game, so I'm not going to really talk about it. But yeah, I'll put a little bit of footage up so you can probably see and you might remember it. And finally, Sprint Master, which is kind of like an Atari 2600 port of Super Sprint, which is a sort of genre that I love because I used to love Super Off-Road and games like that. And Super Sprint I have a good port of on my Midway Arcade Treasures pack, I think it is. But this is actually really good. I mean, graphically quite simple, but I remember there's a sort of 8 or 9 sort of tracks you can play, and the physics and the controlling of the cars is really good. I think there's like turbo things and things to slow you down and stuff. But it's a basic sort of top-down racer, but a lot of fun and pretty good arcade game, and plays well with a joystick. So I do remember having a lot of fun on that. Some of the tracks can get quite difficult, so the challenge is there as well. And that's it as far as what we can find. I mean, there might be the odd game lurking around elsewhere. A couple of game manuals still, which seems odd that I've just got a couple still in this box but nothing else. But you know how things get put into storage, and you know, it's good to visit my folks and see what's up here again. I know it's been about a year since me and Rudy did our loft video up in this place, so you've probably seen a lot of the stuff anyway. And if not, check that video out so you can see what else is lurking around here. But thanks again for watching. Hope you enjoyed talking about some very retro games there. It's a good throwback for me, and I'm looking forward to trying a few of these out on the emulators again, because getting these old consoles working on a new TVs seems more of a pain than it should be. And although it's nice to play on the original hardware, convenience is also essential in modern world. You're a busy guy like myself, so you know. But cheers again for watching, and I'll catch you again soon.